I trusted my pension would protect me. Now I beg outside the factory I gave my life to. My name is Frank. I'm 55, a welder, and I hold a cardboard sign where I used to punch a time clock. 32 years I showed up. 32 years I believed the promise. Work hard, pay in, retire secure. I had a house, a wife who laughed at my jokes, and a pension fund that looked solid as steel. Then the company filed bankruptcy 2 months before I could touch that money. Not a penny left. The house went next. My wife moved in with her sister. I kept thinking I'd bounce back, find work, fix this, prove I wasn't done. But factories want young backs now. The street taught me new math. Count quarters, not years. Measure hope in coffee warmth, not comfort. The hardest part? Standing outside the same gates where I once belonged, asking for change from men who used to be my equals. When a lifetime of loyalty gets erased by lawyers and corporate promises, what's left of the man who believed the system would catch him? I clocked in at 6:47 a.m. like I had every weekday for 32 years. The time card made that familiar chunk sound sliding into the machine. Same rust stains on the concrete floor. Same coffee burning in the break room pot. Same joke from Rodriguez about the Bears never making the playoffs. Nobody knew this was my last day. Hell, I didn't know it either. I pulled on my safety glasses and grabbed my welding torch. The morning shift always felt good. Your hands steady, your back not screaming yet, the metal clean and ready. I was finishing a joint on a hydraulic press when the PA system crackled to life. All personnel report to the main floor for a company announcement. All personnel to the main floor. We looked at each other. Company announcements meant layoffs or new safety rules. Never good news. The floor filled with 300 workers in hard hats and steel-toed boots. Management stood on a platform near the loading dock. I recognized the plant manager, but the suits next to him were strangers. Lawyers, probably. Effective immediately, the plant manager said, Consolidated Steel is filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The words hit like a punch to the gut. I felt my knees go soft. All operations will cease at the end of today's shift. Final paychecks will be distributed this afternoon. Someone behind me said, What about our pensions? The lawyer stepped forward. He had the look of a man who delivered bad news for a living. The pension fund is unfortunately part of the bankruptcy estate. All retirement benefits are frozen pending court proceedings. Frozen, like it might thaw out someday. But I knew better. 32 years of payments into that fund, and it was gone. The announcement lasted 10 minutes. Questions got non-answers. Men who'd worked here longer than their kids had been alive stood there looking lost. Some were crying. Others were already pissed, talking about lawyers and unions and what we could do. I went back to my station and finished the weld. Seemed stupid, but what else was I going to do? Stand around and complain? The hydraulic press needed that joint. Even if nobody would be here tomorrow to use IT lunch, the cafeteria felt like a funeral. Guys picked at their sandwiches and stared at nothing. Tommy Martinez had 28 years in. Bill Kowalski, no relation, had 34. We all did the same math. Too young for Social Security, too old for anyone to hire. I cleaned out my locker after lunch. 32 years of stuff. Safety manuals, a spare pair of gloves, breath mints, and a photo of Linda from our anniversary dinner last year. She was smiling in that picture, holding up her wine glass. We'd been celebrating my upcoming retirement. I walked to the parking lot carrying a cardboard box with my life's work inside. The late afternoon sun made everything look orange and sad. Other guys were loading their cars, some still in shock, others already making plans. Rodriguez was talking about moving to Texas where his brother worked construction. I sat in my Honda and looked at the numbers. We had $3,400 in savings. The house payment was $1,247 a month. Linda made maybe $900 at the diner, if she got good tips. Even if I found work tomorrow, which wasn't happening, it wouldn't pay what I made here. The math was simple and terrible. I started the car and headed home, wondering how I was going to tell Linda that everything we'd planned was gone. The radio was playing some classic rock song, but I turned it off. I needed quiet to figure out what words you use to explain that 32 years of your life just disappeared. The traffic light at Maple Street turned red, and I stopped behind a minivan with soccer ball stickers on the back window. Normal people heading home from normal jobs, probably thinking about dinner and homework and weekend plans. I envied them so much it hurt. When I pulled into our driveway, Linda's car wasn't there. Linda was already home when I walked through the front door. She was sitting at the kitchen table with the newspaper spread open and a cup of coffee getting cold. The headline read, "Local steel plant closes, 300 jobs lost." Mrs. Patterson called, Linda said without looking up. Her husband worked in shipping. I set my cardboard box on the counter and sat down across from her. The kitchen table had seen a lot of conversations over the years, homework battles with the kids, holiday meal planning, dreams about retirement. This felt different. "Tell me," she said. "Pension's gone." "All of it." Linda nodded like she'd been expecting this. "How gone?" "Bankruptcy court. Could be years before we see anything, if we ever do." She got up and poured me coffee, then returned with our checkbook and a shoebox full of bills. We spread everything out between us like we were preparing for surgery. "Let's see what we've got." Linda said that I pulled out my calculator, the same one I'd used to figure property taxes and car payments for 20 years. Linda sorted the bills: mortgage, car payment, utilities, insurance, groceries. The regular monthly stuff that keeps a life running. "Savings first," I said, opening the checkbook. $3,412.18. Linda wrote it down on a piece of scrap paper. "My income. Last month, I made $847. Good month. House payment, $1,247. Due on the 15th. I punched numbers. $3,412 divided by $1,247 equals 2.7 months. If we paid nothing but the mortgage. But we have to eat," Linda said. "And keep the lights on." We went through everything. Car payment, $312. Electric, $89 last month. Gas, $67. Phone, $43. Insurance, $156. Groceries, $200 if we were careful. The calculator showed $2,114 in monthly expenses, not counting the mortgage. Linda's income covered less than half. "What if I picked up more shifts?" Linda asked. "Even if Jerry gave you full time, you'd make what? $200 a month. Maybe $1,300 with tips." I added it up. Even with Linda working 60 hours a week, we'd be $650 short every month. In 3 months, we'd have no savings and no way to catch up. "I'll find something," I said. "Has to be factories hiring." Linda reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm from the coffee cup. "What about unemployment? Maybe $300 a week. For 6 months. We sat there looking at the numbers. The math was brutal and honest. Even if everything went perfectly, Linda got more hours. I found work immediately. We cut every corner. We were looking at losing the house. "We could sell my car," Linda said. "It's worth maybe $4,000. Then how do you get to work? Bus? Walk?" I knew she was trying to help, but selling the car would buy us 2 months, maybe 3. And then what? The kitchen felt smaller than usual. The refrigerator hummed. The wall clock ticked. Outside, Mrs. Chun was watering her garden like nothing had changed. Linda started crying quietly. Not dramatic sobs, just tears rolling down her cheeks while she stared at the numbers. 32 years, she said. "We did everything right." "I know. We saved. We paid our bills. We didn't live fancy." "I know, honey. And it doesn't matter." I wanted to tell her it would be okay. That we'd figure something out. That people like us don't end up losing everything. But the calculator sat there between us with its cold, honest display. The phone rang. "Frank?" "Thank God. I heard about the plant on the news." My brother Danny was calling from Milwaukee. I could hear his kids arguing in the background and a TV playing cartoons. "Yeah, it's not good," I said. Linda was listening from the kitchen table, her face still streaked with tears. "Listen, I talked to my supervisor at the warehouse. They're hiring. It's not much, $8.50 an hour, but it's steady work." Danny meant well. He always meant well. But $8.50 an hour was less than half what I made at Consolidated. Even working full-time, that was $1,360 a month before taxes. "That's generous, Danny, but you could stay with us until you get settled." The couch pulls out. I looked at Linda. Her expression said what I was thinking. Moving to Milwaukee would cost money we didn't have. Gas, truck rental, deposits on an apartment we couldn't afford anyway. And Danny's house was already crowded with his wife and 3 kids. "Let me think about it," I said. "Don't think too long. Good jobs go fast around here." After I hung up, Linda poured herself more coffee. What did he say? Warehouse job. $8.50 an hour. That's. She did the math in her head. That's nothing. Plus we'd have to move. First month's rent, security deposit, moving truck. Money we don't have. I called information and got numbers for local factories. Most were automated systems that put me on hold or told me to apply online. The few humans I reached weren't encouraging. Midwest manufacturing. We're not hiring. Try back in 6 months. Peterson Tool and Die. Are you under 40? We need someone who can work weekends and swing shifts. Allied Packaging. Bring your resume and we'll keep it on file. Keep it on file. The polite way of saying no that I called back to Peterson and lied about my age. The woman asked about my back. Could I lift 50 pounds repeatedly? Did I have any workers' compensation claims? When I mentioned the herniated disc from 1998, she said they'd call if anything opened up. Linda brought me a sandwich and sat down to listen. Each call was the same story. Too old, too expensive to insure, or too specialized for what they needed. What about retail? Linda asked. Home Depot? Walmart? I could try. The truth was, I'd always looked down on retail jobs. They were for teenagers or retired people looking for something to do. Not for men who'd spent their lives making things with their hands. But pride wasn't going to pay the mortgage. I called Home Depot and spoke to a manager named Steve. He was friendly enough. But when I mentioned my factory experience, he sounded less interested. We need someone flexible with scheduling, Steve said. Weekends, evenings, some holidays. And the starting wage is $7.25. $7.25 an hour. I'd made more than that in 1985. I'll come in and fill out an application, I said. Sure thing. But I should mention, we get a lot of applications. Hiring usually takes a few weeks. A few weeks. Linda and I looked at each other across the kitchen table. The mortgage was due in 12 days. After dinner, we sat on the couch and tried to watch TV. Some comedy show that used to make us laugh. But everything felt different now. The commercials for cars and vacations and retirement planning seemed like messages from another world. Maybe I should call Marie. Linda said during a commercial break. Marie was Linda's sister in Phoenix. Divorced, worked as a hotel desk clerk, lived in a one-bedroom apartment. Ask her what? If I could stay with her. Temporarily. While you look for work. The idea hit me like a slap. Linda leaving. Us splitting up because we couldn't afford to stay together. It wouldn't be forever, Linda said quickly. Just until you find something steady. What about your job at the diner? Jerry's not going to hold it. But there are diners in Phoenix. I knew she was being practical. Linda was always the practical one. If we couldn't afford the house payment with both of us here, maybe we could manage it with me here alone. Lower food costs, lower utility bills. I hate this, I said. I know. 32 years of marriage. And we're talking about splitting up because I lost my job. Not splitting up. Just figuring things out. The commercial ended and the show came back on. People on TV making jokes while their lives fell apart seemed about right. Linda picked up the phone to call Marie. But it rang before she could dial. The next 3 weeks. I hit every big box store within 30 miles. Home Depot, Walmart, Kmart, Menards. I filled out applications until my hand cramped, lying about my birth year on every one. Born in 1948 became born in 1958. 10 years younger on paper. At Walmart. The manager was a kid, maybe 25 years old. He looked at my application and frowned. It says here you've been welding for 32 years. Yes, sir. And you want to work in sporting goods. I need a job. He explained they needed someone who could work nights, weekends, holidays. Someone flexible. When I mentioned I went to church on Sundays, his expression changed. We really need weekend availability. He said that at Home Depot. I talked to Steve, the guy I'd spoken to on the phone. He was friendlier in person, but the questions were the same. Could I lift 50 pounds all day? Stand for 8 hours? Work evenings? I said yes to everything, even though my back screamed just thinking about it. I'll be honest with you, Steve said. We get applications from college kids, retirees looking for part-time work, people who've been in retail. You're kind of overqualified. Overqualified. Another word for too old and too expensive. The interviews started blending together. Same questions, same polite rejections. At Menards, the manager actually said, "We're looking for someone who can grow with the company." Grow with the company. At 55, I got one solid lead at Midwest Packaging, a warehouse that supplied auto parts. The supervisor, Jim Patterson, was maybe 40 and seemed impressed by my work history. "We need someone reliable," Patterson said. "Show up on time. Do the work, go home. 32 years at one job tells me you can do that." The pay was $9.50 an hour. Not great, but better than retail. The work was moving boxes from trucks to shelves, 40 hours a week, some overtime available. "When can you start?" Patterson asked. "Tomorrow. Let me talk to my boss. We'll call you by Friday." I drove home feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. It wasn't welding, but it was work. $9.50 times 40 hours was $380 a week. With Linda's income, we might manage. Friday came and went. No call. Monday, I called Patterson. He sounded embarrassed. "We decided to go with someone else," he said. "Someone with warehouse experience. I'm a fast learner." "I'm sorry. The decision's been made." I hung up and sat in the Burger King parking lot where I'd made the call. A kid on a skateboard rolled past my window. Normal Tuesday afternoon. People going about their lives while mine fell apart. Linda was working a double shift, so I had the house to myself. I made a sandwich and looked at the want ads again. Same jobs, same requirements. Must be able to lift, bend, stand, work weekends. Be under 40 without actually saying it. The mortgage payment was due in 4 days, Tuesday morning. I walked to the mailbox like I had every day for 15 years. Bills, advertisements, a letter from my car insurance company, and a yellow envelope from First National Bank. I knew what it was before I opened it. Our neighbors were wheeling their trash bins to the curb. Mrs. Chun waved from her driveway. Mr. Rodriguez was warming up his truck for work. Normal Tuesday morning in a normal neighborhood. I stood there reading legal language that boiled down to this: pay $3,741 in 30 days or lose your house. $3,741. We had $2,200 left in savings. Linda's tips last week were $73. The math was simple and final. I went inside and made coffee, then read the notice 3 more times. Foreclosure proceedings. Court dates. Legal terminology that meant we were done. Linda wouldn't be home until afternoon. I had 8 hours to figure out how to tell her we were losing everything. I called the bank and spoke to a woman named Mrs. Henderson. She had the tired voice of someone who delivered bad news for a living. "Is there any way to work out a payment plan?" I asked. "Are you currently employed, Mr. Kowalski?" "I'm looking for work." "I'm sorry, but without income verification, we can't modify the loan terms. I worked for 32 years. Never missed a payment." "I understand, sir. But the bank's hands are tied without current employment." I hung up and called Linda at the diner. Jerry answered. "She's swamped," Jerry said. "Lunch rush just started. Tell her to call me when she gets a break." "Everything okay? Just tell her to call." I spent the morning applying for jobs online, but my heart wasn't in it. Even if I found work tomorrow, training would take weeks. First paycheck would be a month away. Linda called at 2:30. "What's wrong?" she asked. I could hear dishes clattering in the background. "We got the foreclosure notice." Silence. Then, "How long do we have?" 30 days to bring it current. $3,741. More silence. "I'll be home in an hour." When Linda walked through the door, she looked like she'd aged 10 years in one shift. She sat at the kitchen table and read the yellow notice twice. "What about your brother?" she asked. "Danny? He's got his own problems. Your pension lawyer says it could be years before the bankruptcy's settled." Linda got up and made herself tea. Her hands were shaking slightly. "I called Marie during my break," she said. "And?" She said yes. "I can stay with her." "What about me?" "She's got a studio apartment, Frank. Barely room for one person." I knew this conversation was coming, but hearing it out loud felt like getting punched. "So we split up. Temporarily." "How temporarily?" Linda looked at me across our kitchen table, in our house, surrounded by 30 years of marriage. "I don't know." The yellow envelope sat between us like a third person. Outside, kids were getting off the school bus, heading home to houses their parents could afford. "When?" I asked. "End of the week." "Before they?" She gestured at the notice point. 4 days. We had 4 days left as a family that we spent Wednesday night packing Linda's life into cardboard boxes and suitcases. 30 years of marriage sorted into what fit in a Honda Civic. Linda took her clothes, some kitchen stuff, and half our wedding photos. I watched her wrap our good dishes in newspaper, the ones we'd gotten as a wedding gift from her mother. Take them, I said. They'll just get broken here. You'll need plates. Paper plates are fine. She packed her jewelry box, the one with the tiny dancer that spun when you opened it. Her makeup and shampoo. Books she'd been meaning to read. Small things that somehow added up to a person's whole life. That I kept my tools, thinking I might need them for work. My work clothes, even though I didn't have work. The TV and my recliner, because someone had to stay and pretend we weren't giving up. What about the wedding album? Linda asked, holding our thick photo book. You take it. It's yours too. I know what we looked like. Linda started crying then. Not the quiet tears from earlier in the week, but real sobs that shook her whole body. I held her in our bedroom, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the mess of a life coming apart. This isn't how it was supposed to be, she said. I know. We had plans. I know. Honey, retirement, grandkids, travel. Remember we talked about seeing the Grand Canyon? I remembered. We'd planned to drive out there the summer after I retired. Stay in a nice hotel. Take our time. See the country like tourists. Thursday morning, we loaded her car. Suitcases in the back seat, boxes in the trunk, her favorite lamp wedged between the spare tire, and her winter coats that I gave her $400 from our savings. Almost everything we had left, but she'd need gas money and food for the drive. Call me when you get there, I said. Every few days. And Linda? Don't tell Marie about. I gestured at the house. Let her think this is temporary. It is temporary. We both knew better, but saying it made us feel less like failures. Linda got in the car and rolled down the window. Find work, Frank. Please. I will. And call if you need anything. I will. We'd been saying the same lies to each other for weeks. But they were the only words that worked. That I watched her drive down Maple Street until her taillights disappeared. Then I went back inside our empty house and sat in my chair, surrounded by the echo of 30 years. The foreclosure notice was still on the kitchen table. 19 days left, alone in the house. I tried everything I could think of to raise money. Linda's jewelry went first. Her engagement ring, wedding band, the pearl necklace I'd given her for our anniversary. The pawn shop owner, a tired-looking Korean man, examined them with a jeweler's loupe. Best I can do is $180, he said. They're worth $2,000. Not to me. I've got to resell them. $180 for rings that had cost me 3 months' salary 28 years ago. But I took it. Next went the TV. 32-inch Sony we'd bought to watch the Super Bowl. The pawn shop gave me $45. My power tools, circular saw, drill press, socket sets I'd collected over decades, brought $220. Everything I'd owned that had value disappeared for pennies on the dollar. That I applied for every credit card that would take an application. Discover, Visa, MasterCard, department store cards. All came back denied. Insufficient income or unable to verify employment. The bank was no help. Same Mrs. Henderson, same tired voice, same answer. Without a job, they couldn't help me. A real estate agent named Karen Hoffman came to look at the house. She walked through every room, taking notes, measuring things. In this market, you're looking at maybe $78,000, she said. But that's if we find a buyer quickly. How quickly? 3 to 4 months minimum. Could be longer. I owed $82,000 on the mortgage. After realtor fees and closing costs, I'd end up owing money I didn't have. What about a quick sale? I asked. Take less money? Even a quick sale takes 60 days minimum. Between inspections, financing, title work. 60 days. I had 12. I called every number I could find for emergency assistance. County Social Services put me on hold for 40 minutes, then transferred me to someone who transferred me to someone else. The final person explained I could apply for emergency aid, but processing took 4 to 6 weeks. Churches were sympathetic but broke. St. Mary's had a small emergency fund, but it was for utilities and groceries, not mortgage payments. Father Rodriguez suggested I talk to Catholic Charities, but they had a waiting list. By Thursday, I'd sold everything worth selling and applied for help everywhere I could think of. The total came to $447. Not even enough for 1 month's payment, much less the 3 months I owed. That I sat in my empty living room, surrounded by blank walls where our pictures used to hang. The house felt like a museum of someone else's life. The electricity bill was overdue. I'd used the last of Linda's tip money to keep the phone connected, thinking potential employers might call. Nobody called. Friday morning, I walked to the utility company office and tried to work out a payment plan. The clerk, a heavy woman with kind eyes, pulled up my account. "You're 4 months behind," she said. "That's $347. I can pay $50 now." "I'm sorry, hon. Without the full amount, I have to schedule disconnection." "When?" "Monday. 3 days." I had 3 days of electricity left in a house I was about to lose anyway. That night, I called Linda from the kitchen phone. She was staying with Marie in a studio apartment in Phoenix, sleeping on an air mattress, looking for work at diners and coffee shops. "How are things?" she asked. "Good," I lied. "Still looking for work." "A few leads." "That's great, honey." I could hear traffic in the background. Phoenix was busy and alive while I sat in my dark kitchen, lying to my wife about how fine everything was. After we hung up, I sat in my recliner and looked around the house we'd bought when we were young and stupid enough to think hard work guaranteed security. The power would go out Monday. Monday morning, I woke up to silence. No humming refrigerator, no digital clock display, no background noise of a house running on electricity. They'd shut it off at 8 a.m. Right on schedule. I made coffee on the camping stove I'd bought at Walmart with my last $20. Coleman fuel and instant coffee tasted like survival. The house felt different without power. Bigger and emptier. Shadows in corners I'd never noticed. Every sound echoed. My footsteps, the creak of floorboards, traffic outside that seemed louder without the white noise of appliances. I opened all the curtains to let in light. November sun slanted through our living room windows, showing dust on surfaces Linda would have cleaned. The carpet needed vacuuming. The bathroom needed scrubbing. But what was the point? I ate cold soup from a can and read yesterday's newspaper by the window. Want ads I'd already circled, hoping something new might appear. It didn't. By afternoon, the house was cold. The furnace ran on gas, but the ignition was electric. I found extra blankets in the bedroom closet and made a nest in my chair. At 6 p.m., I called Linda from the pay phone at the Shell station. Fed quarters into the slot while semi-trucks rumbled past. "How was your day?" Linda asked. "Good. Filled out some applications." "Anywhere promising?" "Maybe." "How's the job hunting going?" "There's a diner near Marie's that might have an opening. Tips aren't great, but it's something." I could hear city sounds in the background. Sirens, car horns, life happening. Phoenix was a real place with real jobs. This felt like the edge of the world. "Frank, you sound tired." "Long day. Are you eating okay?" "Sure. Had a big lunch." The lies came easier each time. Linda had enough problems without knowing mine. After we hung up, I walked back through the dark neighborhood. Porch lights glowing, TVs flickering behind curtains, families eating dinner together. Normal life continuing while mine stopped. I spent the evening reading by flashlight, trying to stay warm under 3 blankets. The camping stove gave off some heat, but not enough. I could see my breath in the living room. Around midnight, I gave up trying to sleep in the chair and went to bed. The mattress was cold, but at least I could pull covers over my head. I lay there thinking about Linda on an air mattress in Phoenix. Both of us pretending this was temporary. The house made settling noises I'd never noticed before. Creaks and sighs, like it was giving up too. Tuesday morning, I woke up stiff and shivering. The coffee water took forever to heat on the camping stove. I ate peanut butter from the jar and stale bread, standing in the kitchen like a stranger. Outside, Mrs. Chun was loading her kids into the minivan for school. Normal Tuesday morning routine. Her kitchen lights were on. Her kids had eaten hot breakfast and watched cartoons before school. I wanted to knock on her door and ask to use her phone, her bathroom, her electricity. But pride is a stupid thing. It keeps you cold and alone when you could ask for help. Instead, I put on my coat and walked to the library. It opened at 9 a.m., and they had heat, lights, and bathrooms that worked. The librarian, a woman about Linda's age with gray hair and kind eyes, nodded when I walked in. "Good morning," she said. "Cold one today." "Yes, ma'am." I spent the day there, applying for jobs online and staying warm. When closing time came, I walked back to my dark house, dreading another cold night. But in the mailbox was an envelope I didn't expect. The sheriff's deputy knocked at 8 a.m. sharp, just like the notice said he would. I'd been awake since 5, sitting in my chair, drinking cold coffee and waiting. "Mr. Kowalski? I'm Deputy Martinez. I'm here about the foreclosure." He was maybe 30, polite but professional. Behind him stood 2 men in suits with clipboards and a woman with a camera. Bank representatives, there to document everything. You have 30 minutes to collect personal belongings, Deputy Martinez said. After that, the locks get changed. I'd already packed what I wanted: clothes, important papers, a photo of Linda and me from our honeymoon. Everything fit in 2 garbage bags and a cardboard box. The bank people walked through the house, taking pictures and making notes. The woman photographed our furniture, our kitchen table, the empty spots on the walls where our wedding pictures used to hang. Is this everything you're taking? One of the suits asked. That I looked at the furniture Linda and I had bought piece by piece over 30 years. The couch where we'd watch TV every night. The dining room table where we'd eaten Sunday dinners with the kids. The bed where we'd slept together for 3 decades. Yeah, that's everything. The locksmith was already working on the front door. New deadbolt, new keys for the bank. I loaded my stuff into the Honda and backed out of the driveway. Mrs. Chin was watching from her kitchen window. She waved sadly, and I waved back. 30 years of being neighbors, and this was goodbye. I drove to the Walmart parking lot and sat in my car, trying to figure out what came next. The back seat folded down, making room for me to stretch out. I'd bought a sleeping bag and pillow the night before, using the last of my pawn shop money. The car became my home. Cooler with ice and sandwich stuff in the front passenger seat. Gym bag with clean clothes in the back. Radio for company. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. That first night, I parked behind a 24-hour McDonald's, figuring they wouldn't mind one car in their lot. The sleeping bag was warm enough, but the car seats weren't made for sleeping. I woke up every hour with a stiff neck or numb arm. Around 3 a.m., a security guard tapped on my window. Flashlight beam in my face, making me squint. "You can't sleep here," he said when I rolled down the window. "I'm not causing trouble." "I know, but corporate policy. No overnight parking." The guard was young, maybe 25, trying to do his job without being a jerk about it. "Where can I go?" I asked. "There's a shelter downtown. Opens at 6. I started the car and drove around until dawn, dozing in restaurant parking lots and gas stations until someone told me to move along. By morning, I was exhausted and desperate. The municipal shelter was a converted warehouse in the industrial district. Line of men waiting outside at 5:30 a.m., everybody looking tired and beaten down. Some were my age, former factory workers or construction guys. Others were younger, probably lost jobs or got evicted. A few looked like they'd been on the street for years. "First time?" asked the man in line behind me. He was maybe 60, gray beard, missing teeth. "Yeah, name's Tommy. You'll get used to it." I wasn't sure I wanted to get used to it. When the doors opened, we filed inside like cattle. Intake desk, health screening, assignment to cot number 47. The social worker explained the rules in a tired voice. Check in at 6 p.m. Lights out at 10 p.m. Everyone out by 6 a.m. "No drinking, no drugs, no fighting," she said. "Break the rules, you're banned for 30 days. My cot was a thin mattress on a metal frame, surrounded by 49 other men in the same situation. The guy next to me was snoring before lights out. Someone across the room was crying quietly. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to strangers sleep, and wondered how 32 years of steady work had led to this moment at 6 a.m. They kicked us all out. 12 hours on the street. Every day, the same routine. Shelter closes at 6 a.m., opens again at 6 p.m. 12 hours to kill with no money and nowhere to go. The public library became my salvation. Margaret Patterson, the head librarian, treated homeless guys with more dignity than most people showed. She never made us feel like criminals for using the bathrooms or staying warm. "You can use this address for job applications," Margaret told me on my 3rd day. P.O. Box 412. "We'll hold your mail." Having an address meant I could actually apply for work. Margaret showed me how to set up an email account and print resumes on the library computer. 10 cents per page, but she let me slide when I was broke. The computers were reserved for 1-hour blocks. I spent that time filling out online applications, reading job boards, sending emails to companies that probably deleted them unread. My employment gap was growing longer every day, and employers wanted explanations I couldn't give. Previous address. Every application asked. I wrote between permanent addresses or relocating, or just left it blank. Lunch was at Street Vincent's Soup Kitchen. Hot meal, no questions asked, served by volunteers who called everyone sir and meant it. Father Rodriguez, who ran the program, was maybe 70, with hands that shook slightly when he ladled soup. "How you doing today, Frank?" He'd ask. "Hanging in there, Father. That's all any of us can do." Dinner was at different churches around town. Monday, First Methodist. Tuesday, Lutheran Church on Oak Street. Wednesday, Baptist Church near the college. I learned which places served good food and which ones made you listen to sermons first. Walking filled the hours between meals. I explored parts of town I'd driven through, but never really seen. Neighborhoods where paint peeled off houses and cars sat on blocks in front yards. Convenience stores with bulletproof glass and signs saying, "No loitering." This was where poor people lived. Now I was one of them. The shelter taught me things I'd never wanted to know. Which bathrooms were safest for washing up. How to protect your stuff while you slept. Where to sit so the guards wouldn't hassle you. Tommy, the guy who'd talked to me my first day, became my unofficial guide. "Never leave anything valuable in your bag," he said. "Sleep with your shoes on. Some guys will steal anything." "How long you been here?" I asked. 3 years. Lost my house when I got sick. Cancer. Missed too much work. 3 years. I couldn't imagine 3 weeks. What about family? Kids don't want nothing to do with me. Can't blame them. Other men had different stories, but they all ended the same way. Flat broke and sleeping on cots in a warehouse. Bob used to manage a Radio Shack until the store closed. Carl was a truck driver until his license got suspended. Jim had been a teacher until his school district laid him off. We're all normal guys who'd made normal livings until something went wrong. The hardest part wasn't the uncomfortable sleeping or the lousy food. It was the phone calls to Linda. Every Tuesday and Friday, I called from the pay phone outside the shelter. Fed quarters into the slot while other guys waited in line behind me. "How's the job search going?" Linda would ask. "Good. Got a couple leads." "That's great, honey." I knew something would turn up. I told her I was staying at a rooming house, eating at diners, keeping busy with interviews. The lies got easier each time, but they felt like swallowing glass. "I miss you," Linda would say. "Miss you too. Marie's place is so small. I can't wait until you find work and I can come home." Home. I didn't have the heart to tell her there was no home to come back to. After 2 weeks at the shelter, I got a call back from Midwest Packaging. Same warehouse that had rejected me before. "We had someone quit," the supervisor said. "Can you come in tomorrow for an interview?" Absolutely. I borrowed a clean shirt from another guy at the shelter and used the library bathroom to shave and wash up. Margaret let me print fresh copies of my resume. Maybe things were finally turning around. The Midwest Packaging interview was at 10 a.m. on a Thursday. I used the library bathroom to clean up, borrowing soap from the dispenser and washing my face in the sink. Margaret had let me store a clean shirt in her office overnight. "Good luck, Frank," she said when I picked it up. "I've got a good feeling about this one." The warehouse was 15 minutes away by bus. I got there early and sat in the waiting area, watching forklifts move pallets of auto parts. The smell of cardboard and motor oil reminded me of the supply room at Consolidated. Jim Patterson, the supervisor who'd called, was about 40 with graying hair and work boots that had seen better days. He led me to a small office overlooking the warehouse floor. "Sorry we couldn't offer you the position before," he said. "But Jimmy quit yesterday. Didn't even give notice. I appreciate the second chance. Your factory experience is exactly what we need. Someone who understands hard work." The job was simple. Unload trucks, stock shelves, fill orders. $9.50 an hour, 40 hours a week, maybe some overtime during busy periods. Health insurance after 90 days. "When could you start?" Patterson asked. "Tomorrow." "What about transportation?" "We start at 6 a.m. "I'll figure it out." Patterson walked me through the warehouse, explaining the computer system they use to track inventory. Nothing complicated, just scanning barcodes and moving boxes. Physical work, but easier than welding. "You'll be working with Luis and Kevin," Patterson said, pointing to 2 guys loading a truck. "They'll show you the ropes." The interview lasted 30 minutes. Patterson shook my hand and said he'd call by Friday with a decision. "Between you and me," he said, "the job's yours if you want it. Just need to check your references." I walked to the bus stop feeling better than I had in months. Steady work. Real paycheck. Maybe I could get an apartment, bring Linda home, start over to the shelter that night. I told Tommy about the interview. "Warehouse work's decent," he said. "Steady hours, no customer bullshit. Guys seem to like me." "That's good. You got any bad references?" I thought about it. Consolidated was bankrupt, but my supervisor there would give me a good reference. The temp agencies I'd worked for years ago would vouch for me. Clean record, no workers' comp claims. Should be fine, I said. Friday morning, I waited by the pay phone outside the library. Patterson had said he'd call before noon. At 11:45, the phone rang. Frank? Jim Patterson. I've got some bad news. My stomach dropped. My boss wants to go with someone younger. Guy with warehouse experience. But you said, I know what I said. I'm sorry. The decision was out of my hands. I hung up and stood there watching traffic pass on Main Street. Normal people driving to jobs they'd have on Monday morning. Lives that made sense. Back at the shelter, Tommy was reading a week-old newspaper someone had left behind. How'd it go? He asked. Didn't get it. Sorry, man. Something else will turn up. Tommy had been saying that for 3 years. I was starting to understand why he'd stopped looking. That night, lying on my cot, I listened to 49 other men breathing and snoring and occasionally crying in their sleep. All of us forgotten by a world that had used us up and moved on. The temperature was dropping. Winter was coming, and I still had nowhere to go. The first workers who recognized me looked embarrassed. Kevin Walsh, who'd been a welder on the third shift, dropped a $5 bill in my cup and mumbled, Sorry, Frank. Not your fault, I said. Others pretended not to see me. Bill Murphy, who'd worked maintenance for 20 years before the closure, crossed the street rather than walk past my corner. I understood. Looking at me meant facing the possibility that it could happen to them, but most of the workers were strangers. The new company had hired young guys willing to work for less money and no benefits. They saw me as just another homeless vet asking for change. Still, it was a good spot. Steady traffic, decent income, and the bitter satisfaction of panhandling outside the place that had thrown me away. The new plant manager was a woman named Lisa Chun. 40s. All business. Drove a silver BMW that cost more than I'd made in 6 months. She never acknowledged me, but I saw her watching from her office window sometimes. After 2 weeks of my daily presence, she came outside. You can't stand here, she said. This is private property. I'm on the sidewalk. Public property. You're bothering our employees. I'm not bothering anyone. Just asking for help. She called the police. Officer Sanchez showed up 20 minutes later, already irritated. Frank, you need to move along. I'm not breaking any laws. The manager says you're harassing workers. I'm standing on a public sidewalk with a sign. Sanchez looked frustrated. He knew I was right, but he also knew who signed his overtime slips. Just move down the block, okay? Same street, different spot. I moved 50 yards down the sidewalk, still visible to workers entering the plant, but far enough away that management couldn't complain. Sanchez nodded and drove away. The new spot worked just as well. Maybe better, because now workers had to make a deliberate choice to help me instead of just dropping change as they walked past. Kevin Walsh became a regular contributor. $5 every Friday, payday generosity from someone who remembered when I'd been the guy with the steady check. How you holding up? Kevin asked one Friday morning. Day by day. You hear anything about the pension lawsuit? Still tied up in court. Could be years. Kevin shook his head. 32 years. That should mean something. You'd think. But it didn't. 32 years of showing up, doing the work, trusting the system. None of it mattered when lawyers and bankruptcy judges got involved. The irony wasn't lost on me. Standing outside the factory where I'd once punched a time clock, asking for change from people heading to jobs I'd never have again. Full circle, but at the bottom instead of the top. Some mornings, watching the shift change, I remembered walking through those same gates with lunch pail and work boots, coffee breath and weekend plans. Simple problems like overtime scheduling and vacation requests. Problems I'd give anything to have now. The factory whistle still blew at shift change, 7 a.m., 3 p.m., 11 p.m., marking time for people with homes to return to. I listened to that whistle from my corner, counting quarters and hoping for enough to buy dinner. But at least I was visible. The guys walking past my sign couldn't pretend that loyal workers were immune to bad luck. Some of them dropped extra change, maybe thinking about their own pensions and how secure they really were. It wasn't much of a victory. But it was something, and something was better than nothing when nothing was all you had left. The reporter found me on a Tuesday morning in February. I was standing at my usual spot outside the factory gates, holding my sign and watching the shift change. Excuse me, she said. Are you Frank Kowalski? She was maybe 35, Hispanic, with a press badge hanging from her neck. Jessica Martinez from the Herald Tribune. Yes, ma'am. I'm writing a story about the Consolidated Steel bankruptcy and its impact on workers. Would you be willing to talk? I'd been invisible for so long that having someone actually want to hear my story felt strange. What do you want to know? Everything. How long did you work here? What happened to your pension? How did you end up? She gestured at my cardboard sign that we found a bench in the small park across from the factory. Jessica took out a notebook and recorder, asked if it was okay to tape our conversation. I said yes. Tell me about your time at Consolidated. She said that I started at the beginning. Hired in 1972, fresh out of the Army. 32 years of welding, steady paychecks, promises about retirement security. Met Linda, bought the house, raised 2 kids on blue-collar wages and company benefits. When did you first hear about the bankruptcy? Last day of work. They called us all to the floor and told us the plant was closing immediately. What about your pension? Gone. Lawyers said the fund was part of the bankruptcy estate. Might get something eventually, but probably not. Jessica was a good interviewer. She asked follow-up questions that got me talking about details I hadn't told anyone. How Linda and I had sat at the kitchen table doing math, realizing our savings wouldn't last 2 months. The foreclosure notice. Linda moving to Phoenix. Living in my car. Learning shelter rules. How long have you been homeless? She asked. For months. And you panhandle here, outside your old workplace. Some of the guys recognize me. They know I'm not scamming anybody. What's that like? Asking for money from people who used to be your coworkers? I thought about it. Embarrassing. But fair too. These guys need to see what happens when everything goes wrong. Maybe it'll make them think about their own situations. Jessica asked about my health, my family, my hopes for the future. I told her about calling Linda twice a week, still lying about my circumstances. About the pension lawsuit that might take years to resolve. About applying for jobs and getting rejected because of my age. What would you want people to know about homelessness? She asked. That it can happen to anyone. I did everything right, worked hard, saved money, trusted the system. But when the system fails, all that doesn't matter. The interview lasted an hour. Jessica took my picture holding my sign, with the factory smokestacks in the background. I felt exposed and vulnerable, but also relieved. Finally, someone was listening. When will the story run? I asked. Sunday edition. Front page of the business section. Sunday came, and I bought a copy of the paper with panhandling money. There I was on the front page. Former steel worker begs outside plant that discarded him. The photo showed me holding my sign. Looking older and more defeated than I'd realized. The article was fair and accurate. Jessica had done her homework, explaining the bankruptcy, the pension fund collapse, the impact on hundreds of workers. She quoted labor lawyers and bankruptcy experts who said cases like mine were becoming more common. But it was my story that anchored the piece. 32 years of service ending in a cardboard sign and a coffee cup. The response was mixed. Some readers sent small donations to the shelter, $5 and $10 bills in envelopes with no return address. Others wrote letters to the editor saying I should have saved more money, planned better for retirement, stopped whining, and found work. Margaret at the library showed me the online comments. Half sympathetic, half blaming me for my situation. America in a nutshell. We want to help. But we also want to believe that poverty is always someone's fault. Kevin Walsh found me the Monday after the story ran. Saw the article, he said, dropping a 10 in my cup. Took guts. Didn't feel like guts. My wife read it 3 times. Made her cry. That afternoon, Linda called the shelter. Janet Mueller found me at dinner and said my wife was on the phone. Frank, I saw the story online. Why didn't you tell me? I stood in the shelter office, holding the phone with 40 men eating dinner 20 feet away, and tried to explain 4 months of lies. I didn't want you to worry. I thought you were staying at a rooming house. Looking for work. I was looking for work. Linda was crying. I could hear Marie in the background, asking what was wrong. Come to Phoenix, Linda said. Please. We'll figure something out. I couldn't go home. Phoenix meant admitting defeat. Here, at least, I was still fighting. After we hung up, I returned to the dining room where men ate donated soup and stale bread. 2 days later, Linda called while I checked. Email at the library. You've been lying to me for months, she said. I know. I admitted. All those stories about interviews and boarding houses, you're homeless. I didn't want you to worry. Worry? I'm your wife. I told her about the foreclosure, the eviction, the shelter nights. For months I hid with pride. I could have helped, she said. How? You're sleeping on your sister's air mattress. We could have figured something out. Together. Maybe she was right. Men my age weren't raised to ask for help. The pension lawsuit is moving, I said. Lawyer says 2 or 3 years before a settlement. Come here, she urged. Marie's apartment is small, but we could make it work. Phoenix meant Linda waiting tables and Marie scraping by. Adding me would strain them. I'm not giving up yet, I said. Spring's coming. Maybe something will break loose. You're not the same person I married, she said. The Frank I married would have called when he needed help. That stung, she said. I love you. Then, I can't keep pretending this is temporary. Margaret, who ran the library, told me Phoenix might be a fresh start. March brought reporters. I turned them down. A neighbor dropped money in my cup and mentioned hiring at a new plant. They want guys under 40, he shrugged. Still, I cleaned up, borrowed a decent shirt, and walked through the plant gate I had watched for months. I filled out an application honestly. 32 years at Consolidated Steel, unemployed since the closure, staying at the municipal shelter. We'll call if anything opens up, they said. A guard later told me to move along. Management called my presence after applying harassment. I moved to a grocery store corner where different crowds left better tips. Regulars still gave what they could, but I missed standing outside the factory that had discarded me. Spring became summer. I marked my first year of unemployment with $11.73 and dinner at the soup kitchen. Linda called less. She found steady work and planned her own place. Our conversations shortened until she quit calling. 8 months since the plant closed, my sign, homeless veteran, lost job after 32 years, had faded. My coffee cup held $3.47. The factory whistle blew at shift changes I no longer kept. I rode the bus past the plant and watched it vanish. Nights were caught 47 at the municipal shelter where men snored. Outside, life moved on. Inside, I counted quarters and hope. I was breathing, standing, visible to people who would rather not see me. Tomorrow I would wake, check the library email, then return to my corner with my sign. Surviving wasn't living, but I wasn't ready to give up.